Good afternoon, everyone. I don't remember how to say that in other languages, so I failed that test that was proposed yesterday. And, if you think your heart rate increases by going up those steps, just try standing up here as well. Okay, so let me get started here. We're talking about educational endeavors and the Training Institute. I grew up in London, born and raised. Much of my family is here. And it's been really wonderful to hear a lot of what has been shared at this conference thus far. And something, while I was preparing what I'm about to share, a lot of what I'm going to share is just some stories of my experiences. But before I began preparing, I was reflecting on what we learned yesterday, this idea of the distance traversed. So we spoke about Rose Garden and this community children's classes everybody went to. A lot of us have fond memories of that. When I was a junior youth, there was no formal program for junior youth, but many of us know the youth at that time would always invite the younger youth in the community. And I have memories of just riding in the back seat of the older youth, driving around town looking for ways to serve, stopping, saying, oh, there's a charity center, and walking in and having everybody ask us to move their furniture around that they've been waiting for months, but nobody had the strength to do it. So you just had all this youth moving furniture around and such. So yesterday, it reminded me of all the proficient farmers that went to sowing the seeds of the faith throughout the past generation. And if we can, I believe I have slides. Just two, though. So I'm going to read this off the screen. This quote came to mind yesterday. Every branch of learning, conjoined with the love of God, is approved and worthy of praise. But bereft of his love, learning is barren. Indeed, it bringeth on madness. Every kind of knowledge, every science is as a tree. If the fruit of it be the love of God, then is it a blessed tree. But if not, that tree is but dried up wood and shall only feed the fire. And this came to mind because everyone, all the farmers sowing those seeds, we benefit from the fruit of their efforts to this day. And, I think the quote's actually right here. Let your vision be world embracing. So what efforts are we putting forward now so that the entire world can benefit from these blessings? And so now I'm going to get more specific into the Training Institute, which is very much how we practice enjoining our efforts with the love of God, expressing the writings in our everyday lives. And actually in our small group session, someone, they said in passing, we can go through it Ruhi style. So, there are the three educational imperatives of the Training Institute. And in simple terms, you have children's classes, so starting from age 5, moving forward to age 11 is around when the junior youth program comes in. And both children's classes and junior youth programs have their own set of materials for the capacities of those ages. I'm mostly going to be drawing from the third educational imperative, which is study circles, also referred to as Ruhi, the Ruhi books. And, it's interesting, we read a quote like this, and it's not like a revolutionary idea, but they simplify an approach into 3 levels of understanding. And so as you go through the material, they would read a quote such as this, and they would ask, well, do we understand the words that we're reading? And, some of us are like, is it okay to look in the dictionary? And it's like, yeah, of course, but let's consult and make sure that the meaning is coherent with what we're reading here. That second level of understanding is, now that we've read this, what are the implications of this in our life? Like, how do I put this into practice? Am I seeing fruit being born of my efforts? And then that third level of understanding, which is quite important, is well, what are the implications of this quote? Like, what are the implications when you read, let our vision be world-embracing? And so world-embracing, that's the entirety of humanity. So if there's anything you're going to take from what I'm about to share next is I'm not perfect in how I do this, but it is a learning process. It's generational in its scope. I've learned so much from what has been shared to me and my experiences up to this point, but also there's much to learn. And even what I share here, some of you might be like, oh, you're still doing it that way? We found a much better way of doing it. Please share it with me. Hopefully we can learn together. So I'll share a few stories here, and hopefully I could touch upon just a few concepts and elements of the Training Institute that I found, a lot of joy experiencing. So let's see, what do I got here? I'm not used to writing notes, so it's weird to look down and read my own writing. So I was engaged in a Ruhi book too. So in this book, you learn about how to have conversations. And the concept that I hope to promote here is this idea of how do we invite friends to walk a path of service? How do we have that conversation? How do we take note of the language that is used? How do we know the prompts of when it applies? How can we be natural in our presentation? And so I was part of a Ruhi book too, where we're learning about this. And just like you would organize any event, we heard about certain activities, devotionals, children's classes. Our group, who would regularly come to study, nobody was available except for one other person. And there was a third who didn't have a ride. And instead of postponing, which normally is the case, like, oh, nobody can make it, I guess we have a free evening. We were like, the practice of the book is actually to perform a home visit, where you go to another person's home and have such a conversation. And so that third individual who didn't have a ride, we decided, well, that individual, that youth, missed a few sessions in the past. So why don't we just home visit her and catch her up? So we go over to that youth's home, and at this particular home, there were homestays that international students who were attending school here in London. And so we are opening up our Ruhi book too, and we're reading a section about the 19-day feast, which is a regular community gathering that Bahá'ís have every 19 days. And these two international students, oh, okay, my voice has changed. There are two international students off to the side paying attention. And as we start going through it, we were just about to start, and I decide, would you like to join us? And they're like, yes, we would, actually. We were afraid to ask, but they come over. So we go through the session. I'm wondering, is this resonating at all? Like, is the first thing 19-day feast? But I was like, it's communities coming together, reflecting together, saying devotions, reflecting on the needs of the community. And after our session, these two youth, they approach and they're, can you do this for us and our friends? We've been wanting to do this. And of course, if any of you got asked that, immediately your mind goes to your schedule. Like, I have so many other things that I'm busy with. But again, enjoined with the love of God. So why are we doing this? So yes, of course, we'll figure something out. This was Tuesday. Saturday night, I get a call. Eric, 6 youth are showing up to your house at 8 tomorrow morning. I don't know who they are, except for one, an acquaintance, and they're going to be at your home until about 5, and they want to do Ruhi Book 1, the first book in the sequence, which is Reflections on the Life of the Spirit. So in your booklets, you see many quotes, there's space for reflection. It's one of those first capacities that you would expect to build. And so, of course, ask yourselves, what would you do in that situation? Well, the first thought is, do you have books at home? Or are you hoping to offer a digital copy? Think about the environment. Is my home clean? So anyway, these youth come, there's so many stories I could share, but I'll touch upon, we go through the first unit of the book, Understanding the Bahá'í Writings. And that unit ends by mentioning, the practice is, let's read quotes such as the one I shared, and let's reflect upon them. And let's build a habit of reading such quotes and reflecting upon them. Bring thyself to account each day, or reflect daily. So the next week, we agree to meet the next Sunday. And next Sunday, I give them a book. There's a Baha'i book. It's a nice compilation called The Hidden Words. Apparently, it contains the essence of all religions within it. Hopefully, we have some here at the conference. But the unit suggests that you hand these books out to the participants, and I do so. I've learned so much of the learning around the world has gone into preparing this material. So why would I second guess what it's asking me to do? So I give them the hidden words. And if we can have the next slide. So actually, before you get to the next slide, the next Sunday, the youth show up, and as they're coming through the door, I just happened to ask, did you get a chance to read from the book I gave you? And one of the youth, her eyes widen, and she goes, yes. And I go, I'm kind of taken aback a bit. I go, oh, do you have any questions? And this is when you can share the next slide. She says, lots. And she opens her book, and it's like she's read it 1,000 times, and every page is like this, just covered in notes. And so I think about this idea of something being enjoined with the love of God, that what expectation do we actually have of the friends that we invite to these spaces? Even this conference, there was such a degree of sincerity to these participants, and I think we need to approach everyone in our life with that same attitude. And of course, we answer as many questions as possible, and this is the next week, right? So a month and a half later, I'll just share a few minor points. Well, they're fun points. So after one session, it might have been the second or third session, one of the quotes in Ruhi Book 1 has a portion that says, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. And so we've done studying, we're having dinner, and one of you says, Eric, can I ask you a question? We're watching this show. And in this show, there are two parents, and they have a son and a daughter. And the son gets whatever he wants. He has his own place, they pay for his schooling and so on. But they treat the daughter so poorly, it makes me want to cry. This show, they frustrate me to no end, these parents in this show, how they treat the daughter. How can I show love to people who treat their daughter that way? And I think about it still to this day, because it's this idea of, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. We're also asked, see in your enemy a true brother, no difference whatsoever. And it's, again, think of those levels of understanding. They're not just reading these quotes, but and I love the arts too, so this is a show, and they're just thinking, if I were to meet people who are acting in a way that is different than how I would want people to act, how can I still show love to that individual? So, it's so profound. And just within a few weeks, another one is, one of them was back in their home country, and she's texting me, and she's saying, my little sister takes piano. Well, first she's saying, I've been thinking a lot about education of children. That was a lot at the center of their hearts. And she says, my little sister, she is learning piano, and my mom sits with her as they're practicing. But my mom doesn't know how to read music. And my little sister, when she's practicing, she's skipping difficult measures So there's like two, the harder part, and the little sister will skip it, but the mom doesn't catch it. She doesn't know. And all the kids, well, they're all not here, but thankfully they didn't hear me say that. They're like, oh, you could do that? My mom doesn't know. And so this youth, she's texting me, and she says, how can I encourage my sister not to do that, and teach her that the only person she's cheating is herself? And so the concept there is this idea of how do you promote active agents of their own learning? One of the principles of the Baha'i faith is independent investigation of truth. And so when we're reading these quotes, are we doing it because someone asked us to do it, that we feel responsible to, an agency or an institution? Or are we truly, doing it out of the love of God or for service to humanity? So I wanted to just backtrack a bit, because remember, how do these spaces form? These two youth approached me, and as much as it was direct, I think we should start noting how that looks like even in indirect form. And I've heard examples of it. Someone's troubled. Oh, my parents, they're treating me this way. They've always wanted me to go this way, but I want to go that way. That is an invitation. You can come together with that individual, reflect on quotes together. Any parents, oh, my children are driving me insane. Education of children. Let's come together as parents and learn how can we think about the education of our children, no matter what age, and we have materials to do so. They call them core activities because it's the core. Let's look at these foundational principles, and then maybe we might be creative and create programs that stem out of it. Another example I wish to share is another example of how a space like this can come together. It was actually just some friends in the community. Some of us had families, some not yet, and my one friend approached and said, can we have a weekly space? I feel like I'm talking to my children, and my capacity of intelligence is degrading to a child's level. I need to have adult conversations. So why don't we just do Ruhi Book 1? So the next week, we just started a study circle. And it was mentioned earlier that, there's this idea of learning. It's a learning process. And then there's also capacity building. So I hope to speak to this point about capacity building. Because there was a participant in this study circle where when we would go around and read the sections, she refused to read. She would read along with us, but she wouldn't read aloud. And she'd say, this is like Shakespeare to me. I don't get it. I'll never be able to read this. And over a few weeks, with some encouragement, of course, we have to be encouraging, with the love of God. The smaller quotes, oh, this one's small, why don't you try this one? And, so on. After a few months, she's reading the quotes, but don't ask me to reflect or share anything about it, because I'll never be able to understand it. A few months later, it's memorization that's a challenge. And then, a few months later, she's like, but didn't we read a quote? Didn't it go, let your heart burn with loving kindness? And she's reciting the quote. So a year into the study circle, now we're in book 2, where it begins introducing this idea of teaching, the joy of teaching. So there are these two focuses. There's your own identity, your own personal growth, but then there's also service to society. And I remember the comment is, oh, you know what, I can understand this stuff, but I'll never be able to teach this to someone else. And the participants are like, oh my God, why are you all acting like this? And it's like, a year ago, you wouldn't read with us. 6 months ago, you said you would never understand this. Now you're saying you'll never be able to teach someone. 6 months from now, you're gonna leave all of us in the dust. You could just see the trend of capacity building in an individual that way. And then again, let your vision be world embracing. I'm giving very spot examples, but how can we engage in a program that allows for thousands to engage in this? And the House of Justice asks us, the challenge that all the friends have is, in light of the circumstances, like what goal is ahead of us and what steps do we have to reach it? And some goals seem out of reach. Okay, well, just do a half goal then and make some steps to reach that. Because, ideally, it's not just for us in this room, it's for everyone in London, everyone in Ontario, everyone in Canada. I'll speak to, I won't wrap up just yet. I'll speak a little bit more. Just this idea, this quote has been shared, regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Education alone can reveal its treasures. So really drawing on the talents of the friends. And maybe this is a simple example, but I remember a few of us were going to get together and do an intensive weekend, which is when you go through one of the books intensively over a weekend, which is something we can all draw upon. We have a lot to do, so we're all free this weekend. Let's get together, eat food, learn, and then go and apply it. It was just me at that time. My wife was out of the province on an internship. So a friend of mine, I was thinking of myself in the study circle, and it's like, would I just keep going and, I have to go cook lunch, continue studying without me. I have to go get the tea, continue studying without me. And I was like, what would that look like in the environment? It seems disruptive. So I just asked my friend, do you mind coming and being the host in my home? Can you deal with the food so I could just focus on the participants? And she was over the moon. Yeah, I would love to do that. She went grocery shopping that evening. It was amazing. And I'm sure all of you are like, oh, that would be amazing. Someone cooking in my own house and like amazing food and all that. And I could just sit and focus on what needs to be done. So like that, I still reflect on the environment of that space. It was amazing. And the last concept I think I will draw upon here, and there's an example of a conversation of an invitation into the Training Institute. And one of the lines strikes me. It says, this isn't something we just add to our lives, but it brings meaning to everything we do. So, everyone's always like, well, I have work, I have to sleep, I have to eat, I have to take my kids to soccer practice, whatever it is. I don't have time for that fifth one. But again, if it's enjoined with the love of God, like what's at the base of everything that we're doing? So this practice brings meaning to everything we do. And that intensive I was talking about, that weekend, the first idea that came to mind was during the breaks, one of the friends had a driving test. So during the breaks, we would actually just get in the car and go parallel park around the neighborhood, just doing things at the same time. The friends who were doing the cooking and preparing the tea for our group, they're studying for exams while in between. Like there's just multiple things going on. There's just so much coherence. There's no conflict between the things in your life. There's this idea of, are we living a fragmented life, or are we trying to integrate everything? Even when we think of the friends we're inviting, are we being very selective? Or is our vision world embracing? Is it our work friends, our neighbors, members of the community? If you haven't had a conversation yet about what that next step is and who you're connected to, hopefully that can arise in your small group or even during break. We just have a few hours left. But again, this idea of just what's our vision? And it could be our personal one, our communal vision. And obviously this conference is a wonderful space to get that conversation started. And there are two others that we're going to learn a lot from. Again, these are just my own personal experiences. We have a focused neighborhood. They're operating at a degree. I don't engage in multiple junior youth groups advancing from book to book. I don't see children graduating from children's classes and entering. It's essentially a developing school. It's an educational program. So these next two, I'm sure they'll speak to that, but there's also so much to learn from them. So thank you very much.